Well, we're getting started. This is week number 3 in our Apologetics course. Today we're going to be looking at, does God exist? The question, does God exist? And what evidence is there for the existence of God? Can someone tell me, remind me, we talked about in the first week especially, what apologetics is? When we talk about doing apologetics, what are we talking about doing? One of you young guys. Defending the faith. That perfect. That's the a perfect short definition. Can any of you other younger guys elaborate on that just a little bit more? Any of you slightly younger, not so young, elaborate on that? So it is giving a defense of the faith, but it's also giving reasons for the hope. And proof, I think we have to be careful with that word, proof, because it's very difficult to prove things. From a technical standpoint, proof means it's a mathematical thing. That means you solve something to absolute certainty. And when we talk about the evidence of God, I mean, I do believe that God has proven it, but us proving it, that's a technical difficulty. Even in a court of law, to convict someone, to find someone guilty and send them to prison, or even to carry out the death penalty, you don't have to prove that they had done it. You have to prove it beyond all reasonable doubt. So that's just I'm glad you said that, because that's, and so when you get in a conversation with someone, we're going to talk about different evidences for the existence of God, and it's maybe not the most accurate to say any of them prove that he exists, right? And one thing we're going to say is an atheist can't prove that he doesn't exist. What you can do is you can look at all the evidence and what's the best explanation for the evidence. So just got to be, and especially when if you get into a college class and you don't want to get in a conversation with a college professor who's 10 times twice as smart as your pastor was, and you say, this proves God's existence. They're like, from a technical standpoint, no, that might be evidence for it. And you're kind of losing your argument because really you're not making it accurate. Does that make sense? Does that help? Okay. All right. Why does it matter? Why does this question even matter? Well, let me tell you something. I don't think any question matters more. If God if God exists, we need to know. This is an imperative. If God exists, we need to know what he is like and what kind of God is he. I mean, is he Zeus just throwing down lightning bolts at us? I mean, we might need to know how to get out of the way or take cover. Are there millions of gods? We need to know that. Is there no God? These are things we need to know. We need to seek out. Y'all, one thing I think apologetics does. I'm a Christian who has staked all of my life on believing that the Bible is true. And yet, there can come up questions and doubts in our minds sometimes about even that. And so, apologetics helps believers strengthen their faith. Because you can say, well, I don't know, all these questions about the Bible. Is the Bible true? Did it change over time? Can we trust the source? All these different questions, but when we can look at the evidence for the Bible and other logical, rational reasons for the existence of God, that is greatly encouraging to your faith. Because it just helps substantiate that we're not believing in God against reason or against rationality. And remember, I said that very first week, the Christian faith is not asking you to take a blind leap of faith. That's not what Christianity is asking you to do. It's asking you to look at the evidence, the historical evidence for the life, death, resurrection of Christ, and base your faith. Confidence. Um, I've seen this a couple of times. I've debates with atheists, and especially like when you're talking about science. Um, Scientists like to say, well, there's rational belief in what you can see scientifically. I can observe it. I can measure it. I can, And faith is like belief in things. And I think this is a wrong depiction, but faith is, well, I believe in things I can't measure, observe, or it's just like they're trying to say it's a leap of faith. So I've seen the Christian apologists or debaters will say, well, do you have confidence in science? Yes, I have confidence that it is true. You know, the word confidence comes from the Latin words confide, with faith. That's what it is. Confidence in the evidence that you can see. And y'all know this says this a few times throughout the scriptures and the Psalms and the Proverbs. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Something I want to point out to you. When you get off, you young guys, if and when you get off to, you might not go to college. If you go to college, great. You might want to pursue a career that depends on a college degree, and that's fine. There are a lot of valid ways to make a living and take care of your family that you don't need a college degree, and that's fine too, depending on what God calls you to. But if you get to a secular college and you get in there, you're going to run into, I'm telling you, you're going to run into professors who are smarter than me and your parents. For some of you, I am your parent, but your pastor and your parents the same person. What a fate! What a sorry, but they're going to be you're going to have professors. They're legitimately more intelligent than me and your parents, and maybe more friendly, more kind, maybe even externally more decent of a person. And their arguments are going to sound very rational, but I want you to realize that both Christians and atheists both put their faith in things they cannot prove for certain as the basis of their belief system. An atheist cannot prove there is no God. They cannot prove there is no God. That cannot be. So they're basing their destiny on something they cannot be certain of. So, yes. The question is, have any of us ever read a book that said somebody else created the universe other than God? I haven't, and I'm trying to think about other religious systems, what their claims are about the existence of the universe, and I'm not as familiar with them. So, right, right. Well, and like, so Islam would hold to the validity in large measure to the Old Testament. So they share with Christianity and Judaism the origin of the universe. So that's um, a shared combination there. Um, I'm just not as certain about the other. I don't know of any other, but there are. I know there are creation legends and myths in different cultures. So that I've heard about over time. But you bring up a very, very excellent point, because you know what the Bible does? The Bible never argues for God's existence. Y'all know of one? Y'all think of something?
No, I was. Yes.
Oh.
Did you read?
Okay. So
I can't hear Adam.
I'll try to repeat the questions better too. So that'll help us get them on video. But the Bible never argues for God's existence. The Bible never says, "Hey, here's the reasons you ought to believe in God." It just assumes it. What you just said, in the beginning, God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There are two types of revelation of truth in the world. And this is looking at things from a standpoint of Christianity. But we see what we call general and special revelation. General revelation is what is revealed about God in the created universe, the created order. General revelation includes consciences of all mankind. But then there is special revelation. Special revelation is referring to God revealing himself through the scriptures and ultimately through Jesus Christ. I mean, ultimately, I'm going to cut to the end. Oops. I want to build up to this, but I just can't do it. I can't keep it in. The ultimate argument for the existence of God is Jesus Christ. It's the ultimate argument for God. Okay. All right. Adam's already referred to Genesis 1:1, but I want to also bring to your attention Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. And this teaches us that even the atheist knows that there is a God, but is suppressing the truth of the knowledge of God in unrighteousness. And that's what it actually says in verse 18. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all unrighteousness and all ungodliness of men who suppress the truth. Then in verse 19 it says this. Watch this. This is Romans 1:19. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. How? For, this is verse 20, Romans 1:20, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. There's not one human being alive who has not seen the evidence for the existence of God. They are clearly seen in the creation all around them. Now, I want to give you some arguments for the existence of God. I have a handful of them here, and I want to touch on these. If you have a question here, we got to do this. We have to stick and move, but I want this to be helpful to you. So if you have a question about something, we'll take a look at the question. But also, I don't want to. We won't get too bogged down. So please don't take it personally if I say, okay, we're going to move to the next thing. Does that make sense? Um, the um, the existence, number one argument for the existence of God is the existence of the universe itself. Guys, why? Can you get that video ready? Why is there something rather than nothing? You know what cosmologists, which are, yeah, oh, lights. Okay, this will mostly, that's fine. This will mostly be hearing, but cosmologists agree, whether they are Christian or not, cosmologists all agree that all of the evidence points towards the fact that the universe had a beginning. And if you reverse, and part of the reason for that is the universe is expanding. And if you one illustration I heard of that is like a balloon. You know, if you blow up a balloon, how it expands as it gets bigger? We'll put that in reverse, and it all comes back, you know. That's kind of like the universe. If you put if you take the logic of the expanding universe and rewind the clock, like put it in reverse, you come back to a point where there's nothing. And so there's, from the standpoint of physics, cosmology, secular Christian scientists all agree that there was a time when the universe began to exist. So there was a time before there was matter, energy, or space or time, which is hard to even comprehend. And um, everything, guys, would you? I mean, nobody disagrees with this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Would you? I mean, okay, just hey, watch this, y'all. Look at this. You're in the forest and you're walking along and you come across this. Oh, by random chance and bazillions numbers of random accidents, this half-filled cup of coffee just came to exist in the universe. No, you wouldn't. If you walked up, if you were in the walking through the jungle and came across a house that was built with electricity, you would say, somebody designed this and built this here. And when you look at all of the design in the universe, guys, it argues for a designer. Caleb and I, the other day, were looking together at some videos of everything from the solar system, and not just our galaxy, but the billions of galaxies. And you know that the galaxies move, the planets rotate around, our planets rotate around the sun with such precision that we can go back and know exactly where they all were 1,000 years ago. That's the mathematical precision with which they operate at. But then you know what we did? We looked at some videos of cells. And when you get down and you look at just one cell in your body operates like a metropolis of things going inside of one cell. There's little proteins that have little motors that make them swim around and do things inside your cell. And all the cells that make you you. Okay, Olivia, go ahead.
I think we can all agree, if nothing, if you're nothing,
Can you rewind it to the beginning?
Erupts into everything. That's it. Some people think God created the universe. Some people think nothing created the universe, which is the funniest guess. And the nothing people make fun of the God people. They say God doesn't exist. I'm like, okay, maybe. But you know what definitely doesn't exist? Nothing. That's the defining characteristic of nothing, is that it doesn't exist. So what are we talking about? Either you think it's God, something you can't see, touch, taste, photograph, and science can't prove, or you think it's nothing, something you can't see, touch, taste, photograph, and science can't prove. But I think we can all agree, if you're nothing, sometimes spontaneously erupts into everything. That's a pretty magical method, you guys. Ask the living people, what happens when you die? They'll tell you, nothing. You go into nothing. And then you merge back with your creator? So start to see more shorts like this. Some people think God.
Thank you, Olivia. Could you hit that light for me one more time, buddy? Turn it back on. So the existence of the universe, it argues for an original cause, an uncaused cause, an eternal cause, something that is transcendent. I mean, if time, space, matter, and energy didn't exist, it had to be something outside and bigger of those things in order to create everything, unless you feel more comfortable with the proposition that nothing created everything. All right. The fine tuning of the universe is another powerful argument for the existence of God. Now, by fine tuning of the universe, here's what I'm thinking about. There are three things I want to share with you: gravity, the electromagnetic force, in the universe and the strong nuclear force within the atom. Now, the these properties, each one of these things, gravity, each one of these things, scientists can observe their effects. They can see what they do, but they don't know where they come from or why they're here. Science cannot answer where gravity comes from. I want to propose an answer in just a minute. They don't know why the world operates off of an electromagnetic force or how it got here. They can't answer any of those questions. But gravity, um, gravity, the strength of gravity, the standard force of gravity in the universe. There's this crazy number, and it's not going to make sense to any of us, but it's such a big number. It's 10 to the 40th power. That's a 10, and then you add 40 zeros behind that. If the gravitational constant in the universe was strengthened or weakened by 1 to 10 to the, I mean, that's a fraction. 1 over 10 to the 40th power, just that much. If it was weakened, stars would not be able to hold together. If it was strengthened, stars would collapse in on themselves, and therefore no ability for any planet or anything to be in any kind of gravitational orbit. The electromagnetic force, and by electromagnetic force, that's what's responsible for electricity, magnetism, light, chemical bonding, is not possible without the electromagnetic force. Um, the, Even the structure of molecules is dependent on the electromagnetic force. It explains to us why atoms hold together, why chemicals react, why light travels, and why matter does not collapse onto itself. So just one thing, without electromagnetism, there is no chemistry. I don't mean doing chemistry in class. I'm talking about chemical properties could not bond or react to one another or form new, Scott could probably say this a lot better than I can, but form new properties, right? You can't form new elements, but these elements form together to make things and substances, right? So, and so without chemistry, I mean, we're carbon-based life forms that are a certain percentage of water, H2O, or H2 something. I think maybe there's, anyway, I'm getting over my head with that a little bit, but I know we're largely made of water, but no chemistry. No chemical elements can bind together without electromagnetic force. And scientists can't tell us where it comes from, or why it's here, or how it got here. Now, the strong nuclear force, when I first heard that term, I had never quite heard it put that way, but it's talking about, the atom it's not the smallest particle that we can observe, but it's the building block of everything. Everything in existence is made of atoms. And atoms are made of a nucleus in the middle and electrons and protons that are arranged in configurations around them. That strong nuclear force is referring to the power and strength of that nuclei in the center of the atom, holding everything together. And it has this unexplainable, ginormous power, but only at a very close distance. So it's not impossible to split an atom, nuclear bomb, but it's very, very difficult. And the power of it, a nuclear explosion speaks to the power of what happens when that power is unleashed. That's where all the power. It gets a little nerdy, and it's really just at the verge of my ability to understand it myself. But a standard explosion is like a combustion, and it kind of works like a rubber band. And actually, a lot of people that are killed by you might in an explosion where people are killed, they could be killed. I actually learned about this in my law enforcement training. You could be killed by shrapnel, like a grenade. You're usually killed because the shrapnel's, it's like a bunch of bullets hitting your body. But you know what else can kill you about an explosion? There is a violent rush of energy that expands and contracts really quick. So it can literally just shred your insides apart or do great damage to your insides. But a nuclear explosion is different. One analogy I saw, it's like a spring. Like, have you ever seen like a spring that's tightly compressed, and for whatever reason that's more like a nuclear explosion, but it's like on the level of a mountain that's compressed like a spring, and it just gets sprung, and all that energy goes out in immediate light, heat, and radiation. There is no rubber band effect. So, and now here's the thing. Let's see. Let's see. Um, if the nuclear force, the nucleus there in that atom, was 2 to 5% weaker, protons and neutrons would not bond together reliably. There would be no stable carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, no chemistry, and therefore no life. 2 to 5% weaker, and what I just say, we're carbon based and a lot of water. No chemistry. Life can't exist. If it was 2 to 5% stronger, most of the hydrogen in the universe would disappear. Therefore, no universe. I mean, that might not be the most accurate, but no life. No life. Now, Christianity offers reasons. It offers an explanation for things like gravity and electromagnetic force and the force of the power in just one nucleus in every atom. Colossians 1:16 and 17 says, "For by him," this is by Jesus, "all things were created in heaven and on earth." Watch this. "Visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him." Now watch this, verse 17. "And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." In Christ, all things hold together. Colossians 1:15 through 17. Now, can we prove that? I believe it because it's been revealed to us by the Word of God. But can you and I prove that gravity is in place because all things are held together by Christ? Or Hebrews 1:3, he upholds all things by the power of his word? No, but that's a better explanation than nothing is doing it. Right? I mean, there's an explanation that there is a deity of infinite power and infinite wisdom who can do it.
And just the opposite. The atheist cannot prove, has never observed the creation of anything from nothing.
Right. Right.
You're talking about all these things that have to exist in a certain way for the universe to exist.
Right.
And there's tons and tons of
Yeah.
things. But I had a teacher one time. So, if you have a deck of 52 cards, you shuffle them, you throw them out on the floor. What chance are they? You shuffle, you throw them out. What chance is there that they're going to line up by suit?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's only 52 issues there.
Right.
Dealing with
Yep.
the universe, the numerals.
And that's what the fine-tuning argument is. If you take any one of those three principles that have a very narrow window of slight alteration means life's not possible, but the balance between them is also critical for, so even the interplay between those principles. So you're right, it's like a billion decks of 52 cards and getting them all to line up by suit and deck, or by suit and number, right, is would be, I mean, the odds of, so the mathematical odds of all of these contingencies occurring in such a way are just so astounding. All right, any questions about that fine tuning? Any thoughts? Any other additions?
John Clayton,
No.
he wrote a book. He was a scientist that went out, an atheist and proved that he exists. And now he's a scientist that works on evidence of God. He wrote a book, Does God Exist? And he has a blog and got videos. And he uses science and reasonable logic to prove the existence of God. And it's written in such a way that really, really good.
That's great. That's great. Michael Clayton?
No, John Clayton.
John Clayton.
Yeah.
John Clayton.
Yeah.
Okay. That'll be a resource if anybody wants to check that out. All right, next argument for the existence of God is human reason and consciousness. Our ability to reason, to think, to rationalize is more than simple chemical reactions and the firing of electrical neurons in our brains. Our ability to reason, infer, and understand things and use logic are strong arguments against the universe existing as a result of blind, non-rational processes of chance. Right? The irrational producing the rational is contradictory. Even the ability to do science itself is based on the reason, like you're saying, to use logic, to use reason. Consciousness. Do y'all know when I say consciousness, it's the state of being aware of yourself, self-awareness, and awareness of your environment. Consciousness, it includes subjective experience, thoughts, emotions, and intentional awareness as well. I mean, we're not just in an environment. I mean, if you go with a strict evolutionary, naturalistic explanation of things, this is where people even get into, people that are consistent with that argument, they wind up getting into a conversation about free will. Do you know why? Because they're saying, because of the nature of what we are, we don't have a soul. Our consciousness is just chemical reactions to our environment. And therefore, under these circumstances that we're in, it could be completely predicted how. I mean, so one perspective on they debate this, and there's atheistic philosophers who, yeah, we have no free will because we're just bag of chemicals responding to our environment. But does that explain your feelings? Does that explain love, fear, hate, sorrow? If humans are only matter in motion, then consciousness is just an illusion. It's just a chemical reaction with no real significance. Now, science can, y'all see where people, you see this all the time, and I think this is great. People hook people's brains up to monitors, and they can see when you're afraid of something, they can see that reaction within the brain. or when you're happy, or when you're all kind of different things. They can see the response in the brain, but that they're just measuring the correlation between the brain's activity and your consciousness. So this is another thing that science cannot explain, where consciousness comes from. They don't have, and honest scientists and philosophers agree. You can't explain where your consciousness comes from. My own theory about the brain, which this is Matt's theory, so you take that for what it's worth. This isn't worth a nickel. But my theory, and I do think there's some evidence that suggests this is possible, is that our brains are the nexus between our souls and our bodies. And that would explain why you can see emotions, part of your brain lights up when you experience an emotion. That would explain those things. But again, Christianity offers an explanation for the consciousness of man. God is not, the concept of God is not some power, he's not just some yin and yang, some powerful force out in the universe or above the universe. He's a personal being who himself is self-aware and aware of his surroundings. You think about the Trinity for a minute. You have one God in three persons. That's three personal, self-aware. It's three in one in three, from all eternity loving one another, and they create man in their image. That gives a plausible explanation for consciousness. We are created in God's image, so we are created to be relational, self-aware, aware of the other type beings. All right, questions so far? Any other thoughts, insights?
Sort of there, that, go to YouTube and look up prayer in the brain. There's a lot of research coming out. Scripture, that it's evidence through brain scans of what is happening when you pray. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next argument. I have just a couple more here. A couple more I want to touch on. Morality, moral awareness. Moral awareness is when we talk about morality, we're talking about right and wrong. What makes things right and wrong? Moral awareness is the deep universal sense that some things are truly right and some things are truly wrong. They're not just personally preferred or socially convenient. Murder, the unjust taking of another life, is wrong. It's objectively wrong. It's not. Now, notice I said murder, not taking of a life. Murder is the unjust taking of a life. Things like capital punishment would be the judicious, just taking of a life. All right? So murder is morally wrong, no matter what age you live in, no matter what class you live in, no matter what ethnicity, no matter what culture, no matter what age in history. Murder is wrong across all times, all cultures, all societies. Same thing with rape. It's objectively morally wrong. And human beings, we have that inner sense of that there is a right and a wrong. Which is even, if we were just a bag of chemicals, then you wouldn't be able to explain the concept of moral guilt. People possess moral guilt. Now, some people, I know, people can harden their consciences. You can have a seared conscience, which is a good argument. Hey, aside, it's a good argument for not allowing little sins to live in your life rent-free. Because allowing little sins to live in your life rent-free over time, you're weakening your conscience. conscience, God's given it to you, say, this is not right. This is not right in the eyes of God. This is not right. But you just give sin permission to live there, and you're deadening your conscience over time, and before long it's bigger sins and bigger sins. Um, um, Moral obligation requires a moral authority. I mean, why would people across time and space and culture and ethnicity agree? And yeah, people get details, yes, but basic things. People agree in what is morally right and wrong. And morality is hard to explain if the universe is a product of blind, unguided processes. If we're only here because of so many sequences of evolutionary accidents, then what's wrong with survival of the fittest? If that's how we got here, does it matter if you commit genocide? I mean, under survival of the fittest, abortion makes good sense. I mean, this is where, y'all, this is where eugenics comes from. In, Now, I'm not saying races are inferior, but people have viewed some races as inferior. And therefore, let's limit them from having babies, or let's exterminate them. If we're here because of a blind, unguided process, and there is no moral authority over us, then why would we not do the best to give the human race the best chance of further evolving? See, I mean, it breaks down really quick, doesn't it? You know, Christianity offers a different story. It tells us that all humans, racism can't be objectively wrong if there is no transcendent moral authority. I mean, we could socially construct that it's not beneficial to us. That's what evolutionary philosophy does. It'll say, "Oh, how do we get morality?" Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, it wasn't beneficial. Racism is not beneficial to us. It's not beneficial to murder people, because if you murder people, other people are going to try to murder you. So we evolved with this moral principle. So, but it's just all based on what's convenient or preferred in your culture at a given time. So, I mean, from that standpoint, what Hitler did in his context is not objectively wrong. And again, you'll get in these. There are today. In order to be consistent, there are atheists who will say, "That's right. What Hitler did is not objectively wrong, not objectively evil," because they realize, to stay consistent with their position, that's an implication of it. Now, can I make a real important clarification? And if you ever get in a conversation with somebody about this, um, I'm not arguing, Christianity does not argue that you have to be a Christian in order to be a moral person or have morality. I mean, that comes from being a person created in the image of God. Every human, by virtue of being created in the image of God, has a conscience, has an innate sense of morality, because we have a moral lawgiver. So, and in some cases, guys, and this would be a I don't have time to elaborate on this, but you might have a Hindu or atheist neighbor who is a more morally upright person than a Christian. Now, that's not permission for that to be okay in Christianity. I'm not saying that. That's not what that means. But you see what I'm saying? You don't have to be a Christian in order to be a moral person or to believe in morality. It's just, how did we get it? Where does it come from? What makes sense of the fact that people across cultures and time have um, held to these things, these universal moral truths? I got three last things. I'm just going to touch on them because my next evidence for the existence of God is the resurrection of Jesus. And I would actually say the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. We're going to take a whole week to talk about the evidence for the resurrection. So we have that coming in a few weeks. But if the resurrection did not happen as a matter of fact in history, what we're doing here today really doesn't matter much, honestly. But if it did happen, there is a God, and you have to take everything Jesus did and said as truth. Every human being needs to wrestle with the historical reality of the resurrection. Did it happen or not? And you guys might not be here for the week when we do the resurrection, but I want to, you young guys, Olivia, Logan, Caleb, Ethan, all the rest of you too, if you have not had a chance to do this, I want you in your life, even when I talk on it, I want to be helpful, but I want you to devote some time in the next coming weeks, months, and years thinking about the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus. By historicity, is it historical or not? Because if it is, you owe your life to Christ. You owe everything to Him. You need to bow down at His feet and worship Him and follow Him. There is compelling historical evidence for the resurrection. And if it's not, it doesn't matter. Maybe Hinduism's better or something else. But can I just say it one more time? You guys, one of the things that has held on to me through seasons of doubt, I think the Holy Spirit's held on to me. I think ultimately it's mainly the Holy Spirit, but from an intellectual standpoint for myself, when I have doubts, but I go back and think, okay, is this real? Is this really real? I just go back to thinking about the details of history that even the atheistic historians agree happened. And the details that they agree happened demand an explanation. And I think from an intellectual honesty standpoint, that Jesus did rise from the dead is a valid interpretation of the historical evidence. That's good. Well, in all of Western civilization as we know it is the fruit and downstream of Christianity. So even from a major shaping of world history, Christianity has shaped the Western world and has had a huge influence on the rest of the world too. Last one I want to touch on. I'm going to have a whole week where we talk about the reliability of Scripture, but I would say the nature of the Bible, prophecy and fulfilled prophecy, is a strong evidence for the existence of God. Somebody that can tell the future before it happens, and then it happens with clarity and accuracy. But the last evidence I have is transformed lives. And can I talk about this in a subjective and objective way? If my life has been transformed by Christianity, then that is subjective evidence for me. But it's really not proof per se for anybody else. And I'm not talking about relativism either. But when you look at the last 2,000 years, at the way that Christianity has transformed the lives of people, and I mean all kinds of people, all kinds of ages, all kinds of, not all kinds, but both genders, across cultures, ethnicity, economic, socioeconomic levels, over space and time, the impact and in the testimonies of people's lives who have been radically transformed, that begins to form a massive testimony for the evidence that God exists and is true and real. Think about the Apostle Paul as one example. Think about the transformation of the life of the Apostle Paul. On the way to arrest, torture, and have Christians put to death. On the way to Damascus to do that. Until what? Until he met Jesus. And I'm going to tell you what the first sight of Christ, it's kind of funny. God had to blind him to open his eyes. But the first spiritual sight of Christ, he hit his knees and said, Lord, what will you have me do? So I think that I heard this this past week. I shared it with Bart and Adam, that I heard one of the great evidences for the existence of God is the transformed life of the church. In other words, a local church living out their faith in truth, in sincerity, is a powerful light in a dark world. So, all right, guys, God bless you. Ethan, would you pray to close us out? Pray for the service we're about to have, and we'll wrap up.